dawn of the Bronze Age, when great empires clashed for dominance over vast stretches of land, a monumental battle emerged as a turning point in the history of the ancient Near East, the Battle of Kadesh. It took place in the 5th year of Pharaoh Ramses II's reign, around 1274 BCE, between the two superpowers of the time, Pharaonic Egypt, led by Ramses II, and the Hittite Empire, under King Muwatalli II. Kadesh, the fortified city on the Orontes River, was a strategic stronghold controlling trade and military routes between the north and the south. For decades, major powers had vied for its control, but the conflict reached its climax on that fateful day when the two armies collided in one of the greatest battles of the Bronze Age. Ramses II marched at the head of a massive army, divided into 4 divisions named after Egypt's great gods, Amen, Ra, Ta, and Set. Meanwhile, Muwatalli II had gathered an enormous force from across his empire, bolstered by allies from the small kingdoms of Syria and Anatolia. But it was not only men who prepared for the confrontation. The gods too, it seemed, were readying themselves for the momentous clash. Omens and portents filled the air, each sign meticulously recorded in the annals of ancient Egypt, adding a layer of divine drama to this tale of human ambition and conflict. The sky was aflame with omens, each a celestial harbinger of what was to come. A star, inauspicious, having fallen from the heavens, lay shining brilliantly in the eastern sky, heralding the brilliance of the coming battle. An additional new moon graced the heavens, a rare celestial occurrence that amplified the mystical significance of the event. And as if to underscore the cosmic importance of this day, a great red heifer, an animal sacred to the Egyptian goddess Hathor, gave birth to twins, a clear sign of divine favor according to ancient Egyptian beliefs. These weren't just random events, they were pieces of a grand design, signs from the gods that the outcome of the battle would be nothing short of momentous. Yet even as the heavens aligned to witness the clash of titans, it was on the banks of the Orontes River that the real drama unfolded. The Egyptians, confident in their strength and eager for conquest, advanced in full force. Their army, a well-oiled machine of war, boasted foot soldiers armed with swords and bows, elite troops armed with daggers and shields, and charioteers ready to unleash swift, deadly volleys. The Hittites, though outnumbered, stood firm, forming a bulwark against the Egyptian onslaught with chariots, foot soldiers, and horsemen. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the roar of the battlefield grew louder. The Egyptians struck the first blow, a wave of warriors crashing into the Hittite ranks. The air filled with the clash of arms, the thud of bodies hitting the ground, and the cries of warriors locked in desperate combat. The fighting was intense and unrelenting. The Egyptians, known for their discipline and training, fought with precision and determination. The Hittites, fierce and resilient, stood their ground, leveraging their chariots and archers to inflict heavy casualties. Amidst the chaos, Ramses II, the young pharaoh of Egypt, distinguished himself. Valiantly leading from the front, he wielded his sword with deadly accuracy, sending the Hittite soldiers reeling. The Egyptians pressed their attack, driving the Hittites back and securing key positions around the city. Victory seemed within reach, but then a dramatic turn of events shifted the tide of the battle. Emerging from a concealed position, the Hittite reinforcements caught the Egyptians off guard. The element of surprise gave them the upper hand. Chariots crashed into one another, soldiers fell like wheat under a scythe, and the cries of the wounded mingled with the neighing of horses. The momentum had shifted. The Hittites, reinvigorated, began to push the Egyptians back. The once proud Egyptian soldiers faltered, their ranks breaking under the relentless Hittite assault. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the situation for the Egyptians grew increasingly dire. Their formations were in disarray, their numbers dwindling. With the Egyptians weakened, the Hittites pressed their advantage. King Muwatalli II, a beacon of authority amidst the chaos, rallied his troops, urging them to exploit the openings in the Egyptian lines. The Hittite chariots thundered forward, their horses snorting, their whips cracking. The foot soldiers followed close behind, their weapons glinting in the fading light. The Egyptians, though valiant, were on the brink. Their resistance, though admirable, was slowly crumbling in the face of the Hittite onslaught. The battle, which had begun with such Egyptian promise, was veering dangerously off course. Yet in the midst of this, the Great One, Ra, the Egyptian sun god, seemed to intervene. As the last rays of daylight faded, the Egyptians, drawing strength from the imminent darkness, made a final stand. This unexpected respite bought them precious time, and as night fell, the battle, much like the sun, dipped below the horizon, leaving the battlefield a tableau of carnage and the fates of both empires hanging in the balance. As the moon replaced the sun, the battlefield took on a different feel. The stillness of the night was punctuated by the sounds of the dying, the groans of the wounded, and the murmurs of those who contemplated their fate. Both armies, exhausted and depleted, prepared for the next day, each side licking its wounds, readying itself for a final showdown. Neither the Egyptians nor the Hittites were willing to yield. Each nation, with its gods, its pharaoh, and its people, was poised for one final decisive engagement. With the break of dawn, the battle resumed. The silence of the pre-dawn hours was shattered by the clash of arms and the thunderous trampling of feet. The Egyptians, under Pharaoh Ramses II, renewed their assault with vigor. The Hittites, led by King Muwatalli II, stood firm, defending every inch of ground. The fighting was brutal, characterized by desperation and determination. Both sides, depleted and weary, fought tooth and nail, knowing that victory here would be a matter of survival and legacy. But as the battle reached its crescendo, an unexpected twist of fate intervened. The Egyptians, pressing their attack, accidentally set fire to the nearby city. The blaze, spreading rapidly, cast an eerie glow on the battlefield, turning the clash of arms into a macabre dance of death and destruction. This sudden turn of events threw the Hittites into confusion. The advancing Egyptians, taking advantage of the chaos, broke through the Hittite lines. The Hittite king, realizing the gravity of the situation, rallied what remained of his forces, attempting to stem the Egyptian tide. But it was too late. The Egyptians, seizing the momentum, pushed forward relentlessly. The Hittite resistance, valiant though it was, began to crumble. The Egyptians, with a final surge, broke through the center of the Hittite line, driving the king and his followers back towards the river. In the midst of the pandemonium, a lone figure stood out. The Egyptian Pharaoh, Ramses II, astride his chariot, looked every bit the embodiment of his god-king status. He drove straight for the Hittite camp, a symbol of Egypt's growing dominance. The Hittite soldiers, demoralized and exhausted, struggled to mount an effective defense. The Egyptians, sensing victory, fought with renewed vigor, ensuring that no escape remained for the beleaguered Hittites. Finally, the weary Hittite soldiers faltered. The Egyptian pharaoh, victorious, raised his arms in triumph, marking a pivotal moment in the battle. His forces had penetrated the heart of the Hittite camp. Yet despite their material successes, the Egyptians did not achieve a decisive victory. This day, forever etched in the annals of history as the Battle of Kadesh, ended without a victor. It was a stalemate, a conclusion as perplexing as the conflicting narratives surrounding it. The Battle of Kadesh, a clash of titans between Egypt and the Hittites, concluded not with the flourish of trumpets and the cry of a conquering hero, but with the somber notes of a protracted stalemate. The reasons for this anticlimactic end are as varied as they are fascinating. One school of thought posits that the drawn-out nature of the battle, coupled with the heavy losses on both sides, forced a reluctant end to the hostilities. The ornately decorated walls of the temple, Abu Simbel immortalizing Ramses II's supposed triumph, stand in stark contrast to the claims made in the peace treaty with the Hittites, which details the extent of damage suffered by the Egyptians. This discrepancy underscores the complexities of historical accounts and the role of propaganda in shaping narratives. The peace treaty, a testament to the political acumen of the era, is believed to be the world's first recorded peace agreement. It speaks volumes of the desire for stability that transcended the animosity of the battlefield, but the story doesn't end here. Decades after the dust had settled on the plains of Kadesh, the shadow of the battle still loomed large. In the annals of Egyptian history, Ramses II, the legendary pharaoh, is depicted as the victor of Kadesh. His colossal statues at Abu Simbel, carved with the precision only the ancient Egyptians could muster, narrate a tale of triumph. But the Hittites, too, have their stories. Inscriptions on the walls of their great cities tell of their resilience and victory at Kadesh. This clash wasn't just a battle. It was a turning point in ancient warfare, a paradigm shift that marked the end of an era of unbridled expansionism and the beginning of diplomacy and negotiation. The Battle of Kadesh, in all its glory and confusion, remains a powerful reminder of the complexities of war and the elusiveness of absolute victory. In the annals of ancient warfare, few battles resonate as profoundly as the Battle of Kadesh fought in 1274 BCE between the might of Egypt under Ramses II and the formidable Hittite Empire led by Muwatalli II. What began as a bold Egyptian campaign to subdue the Levant ended in a stalemate that not only defied expectations, but also left an indelible mark on military history. This is the story of the Battle of Kadesh, where victory was measured not just in conquest, but in innovation and the lessons that shaped the future of war. Our story begins in the 13th century BCE with the Egyptian Empire under Ramses II, a ruler whose ambitions stretched beyond the borders of the Nile. As the pharaoh prepared for his second campaign into Syria, he envisioned a swift victory. His plan involved a three-pronged attack. But what made this campaign unique was the introduction of a new tactic into Egyptian warfare: speed. Ramses divided his army into four divisions: Amun, Re, Ta, and Seth, each bearing the emblem of a major Egyptian deity. He stationed them along his route to Kadesh, hoping to roll through the Hittite defenses with overwhelming force. On the move, the pace of the campaign was deceptively quick. Ramses marched alongside his main force, confident in his strategy. But his decision to leave the bulk of his army behind as he advanced towards Kadesh would prove to be a critical error, a miscalculation that exposed the heart of his power to a deadly ambush. As the Egyptian vanguard reached the outskirts of the city, Ramses established Camp Amun about 6 miles south of the city. Meanwhile, the bulk of his forces remained stationed at Tunip. With the promise of plunder and booty, Ramses encouraged his troops to press on to Kadesh, a move that can only be described as a tragic miscalculation. On the other side of the battlefield stood Muwatalli II, the Hittite king, a ruler adept in the art of defense and deception. Unlike Ramses, Muwatalli had anticipated the Egyptian assault, stationing the majority of his army behind the city. It was a strategic masterstroke aimed at nullifying Ramses' numerical advantage. And when the Egyptian vanguard entered the plain outside Kadesh, the Hittite king unleashed his carefully concealed weapon, a massive chariot force. The ensuing clash was nothing short of catastrophic for the unprepared Egyptians. The Hittite chariots thundered across the plain, shattering the Egyptian ranks. Within moments, the Re division was decimated, their light armor offering little defense against the Hittite onslaught. To make matters worse, the Hittites captured the Egyptian war chariot and horse god, Set, represented by the divine falcon on the standard of the Re division. This humiliating capture shook the Egyptians to their core. Panic spread like wildfire through the ranks, threatening to engulf the entire Egyptian camp. With the Re division routed, the Hittites turned their attention to the Amun division, catching them off guard. Once again, the Egyptians were no match for the Hittite war machine. Chariots collided and swords clashed in a whirlwind of violence. But as the battle raged, another disaster struck. The Hittites targeted the baggage train and supply depots of the Egyptian camp, aiming to cut off the Egyptians' access to resources. The Egyptians, already demoralized, found themselves in a dire situation. The wheels of their war machine were grinding to a halt. However, amidst the chaos, a beacon of hope emerged. Ramses, the Egyptian pharaoh, rallied the scattered remnants of the Re division, urging them to regroup. He personally led a desperate charge against the Hittite flank, seeking to disrupt their supply line. But despite his valiant efforts, The Egyptians were on the brink of total disaster. Yet fate had a twist in store. At that critical juncture, news arrived that turned the tide. The remaining Egyptian divisions, Ta and Seth, led by generals Merir and Bedu, respectively, were on their way to reinforce Ramesses. Hope rekindled, Ramesses shifted his focus to repelling the Hittite attack on his camp. The mere presence of these reinforcements instilled a sense of security, allowing Ramesses to focus on protecting his headquarters. As the battle reached its climax, a flurry of activity unfolded. Ramesses, now bolstered by the arrival of the Ta division, countered the Hittite attacks, driving them back from his camp. With the front lines stabilized, Ramesses turned his attention to the captured war god Set, leading a daring mission to reclaim the fallen deity. However, while Ramesses achieved some measure of success, the battle ultimately ended in a stalemate. Neither side could claim a decisive victory, leaving the outcome as one of the most controversial in ancient history. Despite the lack of a clear winner, the aftermath of the battle saw a significant diplomatic breakthrough, the first recorded peace treaty between two hostile powers. The terms of the treaty, however, remain shrouded in mystery, lost to the sands of time. In the aftermath of the battle, Ramesses returned to Egypt, but not without leaving an indelible mark on military history. The Battle of Kadesh was not just a clash of arms, it was a clash of ideologies. The Egyptians and the Hittites represented two distinct ways of waging war. The Egyptians with their emphasis on divine kingship and grand monuments, and the Hittites with their pragmatic approach to diplomacy and warfare. The Egyptian propaganda machine went into overdrive after the battle, portraying Ramesses as an invincible god-king. But the true story was one of mistakes and near disasters. The battle was far from the resounding victory proclaimed in the Egyptian annals. In fact, the Hittites had inflicted heavy casualties on the Egyptians, capturing an incredible number of prisoners and plundering vast quantities of booty. For the Egyptians, it was a humiliating setback that tested the very foundations of their empire. Despite the reality of the situation, Ramses II glorified the battle as a triumph, commissioning monuments and inscriptions that portrayed him as a near-invincible god-king. These accounts, while heavily propagandist, underscore the importance of perception in warfare. Controlling the narrative was as vital as controlling the battlefield. One of the most remarkable aspects of Kadesh was the revelation of Hittite military strength. Until then, the Egyptians had held a near monopoly on chariot warfare in the region. But the Hittites proved to be formidable opponents, employing heavier, longer chariots that were designed for shock assaults rather than Egyptian-style skirmishing. The battle also revealed the strengths of Egyptian tactics. Their lighter chariots were faster and more maneuverable, which allowed them to harass the Hittite flanks. But the Egyptians suffered from a lack of discipline among their charioteers, often overriding each other in their eagerness for the kill. Another fascinating aspect of Kadesh was the role of intelligence and misinformation. The Hittites had infiltrated Ramesses' camp, gathering intelligence that led them to believe that the bulk of the Egyptian army was still at Tunip. This false intelligence resulted in Ramesses' fatal miscalculation, leading him to march his vanguard deep into Hittite territory. But perhaps the most profound influence of Kadesh was its demonstration of the evolving nature of warfare. The battle marked a transition from the traditional Egyptian style of warfare to a more nuanced and dynamic form of combat. The Egyptians had to adapt to new technologies and strategies, such as the Hittite chariots, which required different tactics and formations. This adaptability would become a critical factor in the development of military strategy in future centuries. In conclusion, the Battle of Kadesh was a clash of titans between two of the most formidable empires of the ancient world. It was a battle that defied easy categorization, marked by tactical blunders, strategic brilliance, and an outcome that was neither decisive nor satisfying. Yet it was this very ambiguity that made Kadesh a pivotal moment in military history. It was a battle that forced a reassessment of strategies, a demonstration of the evolving nature of warfare. The stalemate at Kadesh served as a harbinger of things to come, a prelude to the more complex and dynamic battles that would shape future conflicts. And though the annals of history may remember it as a draw, the lessons learned at Kadesh reverberated through the ages, influencing military tactics, strategies, and the very essence of warfare itself. The Battle of Kadesh and the tactical legacy of Ramses II in future warfare strategies. The Battle of Kadesh, fought between the forces of Ramses II of Egypt and Muwatalli II of the Hittites in 1270 BCE, stands as one of the most meticulously documented military engagements of the ancient world. Beyond its immediate outcome, a stalemate that eventually led to history as first recorded peace treaty, the battle showcased tactical innovations that would reverberate through the centuries, influencing future warfare strategies. Ramses' approach to command, deception, rapid mobilization, and psychological warfare provided a blueprint that later military leaders would study, adapt, and refine. Ramses II's reliance on speed and surprise was a defining feature of his tactics at Kadesh. Leading a divided army consisting of 4 divisions, Amen, Re, Ta, and Seth, Ramses advanced quickly toward the city, hoping to catch the Hittites off guard. However, the Hittites, employing their own deceptive tactics, concealed the bulk of their forces behind the city. When Ramses and the Amen division set up camp near Kadesh, the Hittites launched a devastating ambush. Despite being outmaneuvered initially, Ramses' ability to regroup, rally his scattered forces, and counterattack demonstrated the importance of adaptability in warfare. Future commanders, from Alexander the Great to Napoleon, would emphasize rapid response and flexibility in the face of unexpected battlefield developments, a lesson rooted in Ramses' near disaster at Kadesh. Another critical aspect of Ramses' strategy was his use of intelligence and misinformation, though in this case, it was the Hittites who exploited it more effectively. The false intelligence provided by Hittite spies led Ramses to believe Muwatalli's army was far from Kadesh, a miscalculation that nearly cost him the battle. This underscored the dangers of faulty intelligence and the necessity of verifying battlefield information, a principle that became central to military doctrine in subsequent eras. The Romans, for instance, institutionalized scouting and reconnaissance, while medieval and early modern armies employed spies and double agents with greater caution, learning from the pitfalls demonstrated at Kadesh. Ramses' leadership during the battle also highlighted the psychological dimensions of warfare. After the initial Hittite chariot charge shattered the Re division and threatened his camp, Ramses personally led a desperate counterattack, depicted in Egyptian reliefs as a heroic solo effort. While these accounts were undoubtedly propagandistic, they served a crucial purpose, bolstering the morale of his troops and projecting an image of invincibility. This manipulation of perception through both real actions and exaggerated narratives became a staple of military leadership. Future conquerors, from Cyrus the Great to Genghis Khan, understood that a commander's ability to inspire fear in enemies and confidence in allies could decisively shape the outcome of a battle. The chariot warfare tactics employed at Kadesh also left a lasting impact. The Hittites used heavier, 3-man chariots designed for shock assaults, while the Egyptians relied on lighter, faster chariots for mobility and archery. The clash between these 2 styles demonstrated the importance of technological and doctrinal adaptation in warfare. Later armies, particularly the Assyrians, would refine chariot designs and combined arms tactics, integrating infantry, cavalry, and chariots more effectively. Even after chariots fell out of use, the principles of combined arms and unit specialization remained foundational to military strategy, seen in the cavalry-infantry coordination of Alexander or the Roman legion's versatility. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of Kadesh was its demonstration of strategic deception. The Hittite successful ambush proved that feints and misinformation could neutralize even a numerically superior force. This lesson was not lost on later generals. Hannibal, for example, used deceptive maneuvers to defeat the Romans at Cannae, while Sun Tzu's The Art of War would later codify such tactics into formal military theory. The battle also underscored the limits of sheer numerical superiority. The Hittites' initial success came from cunning rather than brute force, a principle that would guide guerrilla warfare and asymmetric tactics in later centuries. Ramses II's post-battle propaganda further influenced future warfare strategies. The pharaoh's inscriptions and monuments portrayed Kadesh as a glorious victory, despite its inconclusive outcome. This manipulation of public perception reinforced the idea that controlling the narrative was as important as winning the battle, a concept that persists in modern warfare, where media and information operations shape global opinion. From Caesar's commentaries to contemporary military public affairs, the art of spinning battlefield events traces back to Ramses' efforts at Kadesh. In the broader scope of military history, Kadesh served as an early case study in coalition warfare. Both sides relied on allied contingents. Egypt's forces included mercenaries and vassal troops, while the Hittites commanded a coalition of Anatolian and Syrian allies. The difficulties of coordinating such diverse forces foreshadowed the challenges faced by later empires, from the Persians to the Byzantines, in managing multi-ethnic armies. The battle thus highlighted the need for standardized training, clear chains of command, and effective communication lessons that would be refined over millennia. Ultimately, while Kadesh did not result in a clear victor, its tactical and strategic lessons endured. Ramses II's successes and failures on that battlefield became a reference point for future commanders, illustrating the importance of adaptability, intelligence, psychological warfare, and technological innovation. From the classical era to the modern age, the echoes of Kadesh can be seen in the campaigns of history's greatest military minds, proving that even an ancient stalemate could shape the future of warfare. The Battle of Kadesh, a turning point for Egypt in the eyes of modern historians. The Battle of Kadesh, fought between the forces of Pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt and King Muwatalli II of the Hittites in the 13th century BCE, stands as one of the most extensively documented military engagements of the ancient Near East. Modern historians regard this confrontation not merely as a clash of two great empires, but as a pivotal moment that reshaped Egypt's military strategy, diplomatic approach, and imperial ideology. The battle's significance lies not in its immediate outcome, often debated as either a stalemate or a tactical Egyptian survival, but in its long-term consequences for Egypt's political and military trajectory. For centuries, Egypt had pursued an expansionist policy, seeking to dominate the Levant and secure its frontiers against rival powers. The Hittite Empire, centered in Anatolia, emerged as the primary challenger to Egyptian hegemony, and Kadesh, a strategically vital city on the Orontes River, became the flashpoint for their rivalry. Ramses II, eager to assert his dominance, marched his forces northward, only to find himself ambushed by the Hittite army. The ensuing battle, marked by initial Egyptian disarray and a dramatic recovery, ended without a clear victor. Yet the aftermath revealed a profound shift in Egypt's imperial strategy. Modern historians emphasize that Kadesh exposed the limitations of Egypt's traditional military tactics. The reliance on large, slow-moving infantry divisions and the underestimation of Hittite mobility and deception tactics forced a re-evaluation of warfare. Subsequent campaigns under Ramses displayed a more cautious and adaptable approach, incorporating better reconnaissance and flexible troop deployments. The battle thus marked the beginning of a more pragmatic military doctrine, moving away from the unchecked aggression of earlier pharaohs. Diplomatically, Kadesh signaled a turning point toward negotiated settlements rather than endless conflict. The eventual signing of the Treaty of Kadesh, one of the earliest surviving peace accords in history between Ramses II and Hattusili III, Muwatalli's successor, demonstrated Egypt's willingness to engage in parity-based diplomacy. This treaty, emphasizing mutual defense and non-aggression, reflected a departure from Egypt's previous insistence on unilateral dominance. Modern scholars argue that this shift preserved Egypt's influence in the Levant without the unsustainable costs of perpetual war. Ideologically, the battle's portrayal in Egyptian records reveals a transformation in royal propaganda. Ramses II famously depicted Kadesh as a personal triumph, with grandiose temple reliefs celebrating his divine valor. However, modern analyses suggest that this narrative was carefully crafted to mask the battle's ambiguities. The exaggerated emphasis on the pharaoh's heroism, rather than outright victory, indicates a subtle recalibration of imperial ideology, one that prioritized the image of invincibility over actual territorial gains. This propaganda strategy became a model for later rulers, reinforcing the notion that perception could be as crucial as reality in maintaining power. In the broader historical context, Kadesh marked the beginning of Egypt's gradual transition from expansionist campaigns to a more defensive and diplomatic posture. The Hittite threat, combined with emerging pressures from the Sea Peoples and internal economic strains, compelled Egypt to consolidate rather than conquer. Modern historians thus view Kadesh not as the zenith of Egyptian power, but as the moment when the empire began to adapt to a changing world, a turning point that redefined its place in the ancient Near East. After the Battle of Kadesh, which raged between the two great powers of the time, pharaonic Egypt under Ramses II and the Hittite Empire under Muwatalli II, the two sides reached a decisive turning point in their relations. The battle was not militarily decisive, as neither side achieved a crushing victory, but it left a profound impact on the politics and diplomacy of the ancient Near East. Following years of conflict and tension, both Ramses II and Hattusili III, Muwatalli II's successor, realized that continued warfare would only bring more losses, while peace could open new doors for cooperation and stability. The non-aggression treaty that followed the Battle of Kadesh was one of the earliest recorded treaties in history, and perhaps the most enduring. It was not merely an agreement to cease fighting, but evolved into a political and diplomatic document that reshaped Egyptian-Hittite relations. It included clear clauses respecting borders, prohibiting aggression against each other's territories, and mutual assistance in case of external threats. The treaty also provided for the exchange of prisoners and the establishment of continuous diplomatic relations between the two kingdoms. Most importantly, the treaty was not just a temporary settlement, but laid the foundation for a new era of relations between Egypt and the Hittites. The rulers exchanged friendly letters, trade ties between the two lands increased, and the alliance was even strengthened by Ramses II marrying a Hittite princess. This political marriage was not a fleeting event, but a symbol of genuine rapprochement between the two peoples. The peace treaty after Kadesh proved that diplomacy could be a successful alternative to war and that shared interests could overcome ancient enmities. This peace lasted for decades, even after the fall of the Hittite Empire, and remained a model for ancient international relations. Technological advancements in chariots and their impact on battle outcomes. Chariots were one of the most influential weapons in ancient warfare, playing a decisive role in shifting the course of battles and establishing dominance on the battlefield. Since their emergence in the 3rd millennium BCE, chariots underwent significant technological advancements that helped armies achieve military superiority. Initially, chariots were made from simple materials like wood and leather, making them lightweight and fast, but unable to withstand heavy impacts. Over time, major improvements were introduced in wheel design, as solid wooden wheels were replaced by spoked wheels, increasing their flexibility and maneuverability on rough terrain. The chariot's frame was also reinforced with metals like bronze and iron, making it more resistant to enemy strikes and weapons. Regarding the steering system, more efficient rotating axles were developed, allowing chariots to move faster and change direction easily during combat. The introduction of wheel bearings reduced axle friction, increasing the chariot's speed and durability before requiring repairs. One of the most critical advancements was in weaponry, as platforms for launching spears or arrows were installed, transforming chariots from mere transport units into mobile combat platforms capable of inflicting heavy casualties from a safe distance. Additionally, side shields were added to protect archers and soldiers, increasing their survival chances on the battlefield. In major battles like Megiddo and Kadesh, advanced chariots proved their strategic superiority by utilizing their speed and maneuverability to outflank enemy armies and disrupt their formations. Their use in lightning strikes gave military leaders the element of surprise, often leading to decisive victories. Over time, chariot warfare declined with the rise of cavalry and heavily armored infantry, but its legacy remained influential in the evolution of military tactics and engineering. Chariots represented a qualitative leap in the history of warfare, transforming battles from static confrontations into dynamic conflicts reliant on speed and tactics.